So Randy is an experienced C-level executive. He's an attorney, we'll be praying for him, and he's a consultant with a history in the entertainment, technology, and investment banking industries. He's a visionary who understands consumer demands and behavior, technology, business operations, as well as finance. He successfully led the turnaround and growth of companies in numerous sectors, including entertainment, hospitality, technology, transportation, construction, and manufacturing. And since 2006, he's the CEO of PARC Management. They own and operate entertainment venues across the USA. So Randy and his wife reside in Jacksonville, Florida, the United States of America, and he's also the guy who was integral in the starting of the Life of Leadership chapter in Jacksonville, Florida, many years ago. So would you mind joining me in welcoming Randy Drew?
Well, for me, it is morning. For you, evening. Good evening. I am honored to be with you. I hope that you can hear me well and understand me. I'm difficult with my accent, even in the United States. Following Alan Platt and your other speaker today is very difficult because it leaves actually very little to say. But we're talking about generosity, and generosity is often thought of in terms of money. It is sometimes referred to as being kind, and it is always discussed in the context of sharing what you possess with others. But generosity, like all things in our life, is really defined and governed by our worldview. And I understand you had worldview as your last class. And you learned that it's the lens through which we see our world, through which our decisions are framed and made. And so as we talk about generosity today, we also need to be mindful that our worldview really affects how we see generosity. So I'm going to share with you today some of my life journey. It's been up and down, and in it, I share it for the purpose of context, and I'm going to pose some questions for us to think about as we walk through this together. Because our worldview causes us, or should cause us, to ask, my time, my talent, my treasure, are they really mine? And for what purpose do I possess them? And if these are as we often say, the fruits of my labor, then am I the master of that fruit? And should I work even harder to amass more fruit? In my life journey, I was taught the value of hard work, and I have worked since I was 14. I was taught to save money, and my mother taught me to be kind and to help others. But I learned early that hard work was essential for me. I didn't come from a background of affluence. I was blessed with a family attitude that I could do anything, but that required me figuring out how to do that. So I worked my way through college and managed to squeeze 4 years into 6 years of college. And then I went on to law school. I was performance oriented. I was not going to allow anyone to outwork me. I was result oriented, and as a result of hard work, I thought I had received the honors and success through my efforts. I felt a responsibility for my family and my community, and I found comfort in what I possessed. I found comfort in the money that I saved, and we'll talk about that, how the Lord has taught me differently. But all of this to say that through this journey, I worked hard, and I thought that hard work was really the measure of things. I always believed in the Lord. I believe the Lord gave me the abilities to do what I did. Also felt like He wanted me to do the things that I did. And in 2009 was a year in which I was recognized as the ultimate CEO for large companies by our business journal. And so this was also recognition in my mind that what I was doing was good. And there was good in it. But I will say that I, as we're going to talk about, have come to see things differently. And I've also come to see God's economy differently. I believe that God desires genuine relationship. He desires our trust and our reliance upon Him. And He also sees our relationships differently than we. In my church, an Anglican church, we often recite something during the offertory. And it goes like this: Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. For everything in heaven and on earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. All things come from you, O Lord, and of your own have we given you. Well, I talked about 2009, but in 2009, my personal life fell apart, and my business life became a war zone, fractionalized by betrayal and the same success mindset, that driven mentality. During that time, I was asked by a friend, would I be okay? Would I make it through this storm? Because we all know that we have storms in our life. They come and they go. Would I make it through? And I made this remark, which I have now come to see as completely arrogant and misplaced. I said, of course I will make it through. I have accumulated enough savings to see me through rough times. Well, it was shortly after that that my wife of 30 years told me that she was leaving me, that we did not have a relationship. I really struggled to try to keep our marriage. I loved our two sons, and I couldn't imagine it being different. But in what seems like a very short time, my wealth was gone and my family life changed. I was divorced, and my children remarked that they didn't really know who I was. And I love the Lord. I always have. I'm adopted, and I have always known the Lord as my true father. He gave me life and a family to raise me. He gave me a name and a place to grow. He shaped me with friends and experiences. He had favored me throughout my life with opportunity and success. So I knew and loved the Lord, but I had become self-reliant arrogant, prideful, a workaholic. I began to see, quote, my accomplishments not as his gifts, but as the fruits of my labor, my intellect, my relationships, my hard work. I began to see my wealth as my protection and my identity. It seems so clear now. It was not then. It was a subtle journey to that point. It was a slow process, but the enemy had done his work. I had become wrapped up in myself. I might have easily recited at church, yours, O Randy, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory. The fruits of your labor, of your efforts, of your intellect are yours. And I was wrong. The Lord carefully removed all of this from me. I was at a lunch as my business was being stripped away and scaled down, and a man I did not know sat beside me. And in the course of a very large convention center where hundreds of people were gathered, he leaned over and said, I have a word from God for you. And I looked, stunned. Who is this man who would have a word for me? And the word was, the Lord told me to tell you that sometimes a fruit must fall to the ground and die so that its seed can have new life. And he wants you to know that while this is hard, he loves you. Wow. This journey caused me to re-examine myself and my views. He had changed my view of my family. He had cut down my business. We were a large company with over 9,000 employees. We went from hundreds of millions of dollars in revenues to less than 6. And we were a very different place. And as he pruned my tree, he graciously showed me his mercy and his grace. And he consistently provided me with his manna and his miracles. In over a 7-year walk with me, he has been teaching me who he is. And I share a couple of brief stories with you as example of who he is. At one point, our company was crashing and we desperately needed money. I received a call from the owner of a business that I had turned around and sold to him a couple of years before. In that sale, I took back stock warrants. I knew they would never be of any value, but on the off chance that it might, I required that, and he agreed. But I didn't expect anything. So he called to say, you have these warrants in our company, and we need to acquire them. I said, okay. And he offered me a price, and I thought, okay. And then I didn't hear from him. So I thought, wow, Lord, I thought this was the blessing that you were going to provide. Later, the gentleman called me back and said, well, I know I offered you $100,000 for your warrants, but I really have to have the warrants today. And I said, well, you walked away. And he said, well, I need to wire the money to you today. And I said, how much money are you wiring today? He said, well, your warrants are worth $1.1 million. And I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't imagine that God would provide what we needed in that way. And I wish that for me, it only took one story of His majesty. It only took one moment of His correction. But I think I'm a slow student. During my journey with God, I have drawn closer to Him. He has restored my relationship with my two sons, and He has generated with my ex-wife a good friendship, and He has blessed me with a second wife who was a longtime friend for 30 years and who has given me a wonderful life. And we now have a combined family of 7, and I have a daughter now who is 17, and I am richly blessed. So my journey is too long to share here, but I want you to know that God, through this time, has caused me to examine my worldview and my view of generosity. A few years ago, my wife called and said God spoke to her and asked her to call a friend from high school and to give the friend $1,500. It was a time when we had no money. We could find it, but it wouldn't be out of abundance. It would have been hard. It would be hard to find it. And in my old life, I would have said, no, this is crazy. I don't know that you heard from God. I don't know that God wouldn't have told us to give money that we really don't have. But I said, there's one thing we have learned in this journey. It is all His. And if He asks, the question is not why or how. It's just to do it. And my wife was nervous. She hadn't spoken with this person in over 20 years. What if she was wrong? What if she had misheard God? What if? And we just said, we have to trust God. So she took the money to her mother's house and put the money under a doormat and called to the lady and said, I don't know if you remember me, but there it is. God told me to do this. We learned later that the friend had a son who was battling cancer and a daughter who was planning to marry. And because of the son's cancer treatments, they didn't have the money for the wedding. They needed $1,500. And the mother and the daughter had prayed to the Lord for that money. And within an hour of their prayer, the call from my wife came in. On that day, the Lord showed me the blessing that comes from generosity. Blessings that come to both parties when we know He is in control. For truly all we have is from Him, and if we allow Him to lead us in our sharing of what He provides, we are richly blessed. I want to leave you with a word picture. And this comes from John Cortines in his book, True Riches, what Jesus really said about money and your heart. Our handling of money can lead us to true riches of a deeper relationship with Jesus Himself, marked by gratitude, contentment, trust, and love, But if we pursue money for its own sake, we are chasing false riches, and our lives will become marked by pride, coveting, anxiety, and indifference. So my definition of generosity today is giving freely that which is His to those whom He calls us into relationship. It is all His. We give what is His, and we are called into a life of gratitude and contentment and trust and love. As Alan says, we are called to become lambs as we walk in the abundance of the Lord. Thank you. I hope my short journey is helpful in your understanding of generosity.
Yeah, Randy, thank you so much for sharing out of your life and your personal life experiences. You're bold and you're brave, and we pray. First of all, we thank God for you and the integral role that you played, even in the start of Life with Leadership so many years ago. Your good friend, Steve French, already whispered in my ear that he believes if it wasn't for you and the part you played, LifeWork might not have even existed today. So just look at this, and if you scroll to the left and the right on your screen, you can see part of that fruit, even of your generosity and your practical giving enabled this on the southern tip of the continent of Africa. So would you join me in giving Randy a round of applause virtually then as well? Thank you so much, Randy. We bless you.